Today we're here to talk about transitioning from developer to leader. Now, Ian and I have worked together over the last 6 years in 2 different organisations. And I guess the reason that we wanted to do this presentation today is because we've learnt so much from each other over that 6 years. And we come from completely different backgrounds, completely different roles, definitely completely different personality types and leadership styles, but we've really learned and helped each other on our leadership journeys. My experience over the last 20 years has predominantly been in leadership roles and HR roles. So over the years, I've helped probably hundreds of developers move into leadership roles and help them with their career progression. And I've also been responsible for end-to-end business management, so managing profit and loss and full business management, which is a whole other area of learning for a leader or a manager. I've also cemented my experience over the last 8 years by doing my MBA and my Masters of HR, which has definitely helped.
Yes, bom dia. I thought I'd try a bit of Portuguese. Good morning. Thank you for coming along what I'm calling the hangover shift. Do appreciate you coming out, though. I've worked in development for over 20 years. I started in Ireland and I now live in Australia, which is why I have a slightly strange accent. And I'd like to tell you my story of moving from developer to leadership. I started off, my primary degree was in computer science, like I'm sure most of yours was. But I've also completed a master's in management of information systems, which was a business-focused degree with an IT slant. And the goal of that was to kind of create technical leadership, or CIOs, ideally. Now, I haven't been a CIO as yet, but I have worked in kind of development manager or engineering manager lead roles for most of my career, and mostly in consulting. So I've seen a lot of different companies, I've seen a lot of different teams, I've seen a lot of different styles of leadership over the years, and hopefully I'll be able to share some things that will help you, and share some failings that I've made that will hopefully help you too.
Yes, plenty of those for me anyway. So I was pushed into my first leadership role at 21, which was almost 20 years ago now, and it was managing a retail computer business. And I was passionate and smart, but I had absolutely no idea what it meant to be a leader. And I didn't know what a good leader looked like because I'd never had one. So I just did what came naturally to me, which was to be a perfectionist control freak. I was super critical, I had to tell everyone what to do, and I thought that people were quite incompetent. So I was a nightmare. I was a complete micromanager. And unsurprisingly, we had quite a high employee turnover because of that. The business was relatively successful, mostly because I was doing about 80 hours a week and just doing everything myself. And I purchased the business, but I was reaching burnout stage because of the amount of hours, and I couldn't possibly take a holiday because, who else would do the work if I wasn't there? One day, a guy named Bernie came into the computer shop and he was looking to buy a computer. And we got talking, and he was a business coach. And I think maybe he could tell that I needed a bit of help because he offered a trade of his business coaching services for a computer. And thankfully, I think I realised that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I said yes. The first thing that Bernie got me to do was the good old personality profiles and psych tests, and sure enough, it came back with my perfectionist, control freak, micromanager results. And that was a huge aha moment for me, because up until that stage, I didn't realise I was doing anything wrong. I thought I was really efficient, and I thought I was working really hard, and I didn't actually realise that there was a problem. So when we saw those results and he helped me understand that these natural styles that I had were getting in the way of me becoming a good leader, it was the first step to actually starting to work on them. So over the next few years, I practiced being less of a control freak. I practiced delegating more and empowering more and using a lot more positive reinforcement. I still had a long, long way to go, but it was a good start. And by the time I sold the business, another 4 years down the track, all our employees had been there for over 18 months, and I'm still friends with most of them today, so I think that's a good sign. So I guess my key learnings through that experience was delegating and empowering. Everyone makes mistakes, and that's okay, but it's really important not to try and do everything yourself. that there is no such thing as perfect and stop looking for it. So, when somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, look, this is what I've done, ask myself, is it good enough? Because it doesn't matter if I can see a tiny little area for improvement. Is it good enough? And if it's good enough, just say great job. It means so much to people when you just say great job as opposed to saying, yeah, look, it's okay, but you could do this, this, and this. And a lot of the time it just doesn't matter. So is it good enough was a key learning for me. And just to thank people, to recognise that people are choosing to come and work for me every day. So I should be grateful for that. And I need to say thank you and appreciate them. Some tips for you if you're looking at moving into a leadership role. Understanding what your own style is absolutely the first step. Taking the different surveys you can do and understanding what your natural tendencies are, because when you know that, you can start to refine them or completely change them in my case. Ask for feedback. If you don't know what other people perceive of you, ask your colleagues, ask your manager. If you've already got reports in a leadership role, ask them. It doesn't matter whether you agree with their feedback, because perception is the truth. So if you're getting feedback from people, you need to address it and work on it. And read up around emotional intelligence. So Daniel Goleman has a lot of stuff around emotional intelligence, and that's around how we manage our own emotions and recognise what our style is. And get yourself a coach or a mentor. It can be formal or informal. I've had both over the years, but choose somebody who's the type of leader that you aspire to be one day, because that makes it a lot easier as well.
Cool. I'm kind of worried now that I don't do things quite perfectly, but you just kind of go, good job. Yeah. Clicker fail. So my first role was as a developer. Now, I was quite lucky in that through university, I was able to take on contract roles, so kind of short-term contracts during my summer and winter breaks, and was actually able to get experience coding. So my first full-time job was a senior developer. So I went straight into that. It was that kind of time. It was the first dot-com boom had just happened, and basically anyone who could write code could be a senior developer. So I met some really, really cool people from very different kind of walks of life, like genetics, who had learned how to code during their course, and were now kind of developers. And I learned a lot really, really quickly, and I started to get a reputation as one of the kind of best developers on the team. And within a year, I moved into a tech lead role. So I was actually starting to lead teams. I was starting to help to deliver the projects that we were doing for our customers. And at the time, I kind of thought that my technical ability kind of entitled me to it. I was one of the best developers, so of course I should be the leader. But kind of like Donna when she started, I didn't really know what I was doing as a leader. And I wasn't bad. Like, I don't think I was particularly terrible at it. But I just thought I kind of needed to learn more. And to be honest with you, most companies really, really suck at giving leadership training. It's just not something they're tooled up for. They just kind of throw you into it and kind of expect you to pick it up. I did get some training, but it wasn't really kind of useful. It was more that kind of functional training of how you kind of onboard people and offboard people. And I did have a few issues with people on my team, and I wasn't kind of able to solve them myself. I needed to get help from my managers to be able to resolve that. So I decided that I wanted to take on that master's to get more experience in that kind of leadership and get more training. And while I was there, I got a bit of an insight into what my potential future could look like. There were a lot of people who were a lot older than me. I was still quite young then. They were in middle management, basically, in IT. So they were development managers or delivery managers. Some of them were project managers. And most of them had started in tech. They were writing code or they were building infrastructure and had moved into this middle management role. And they kind of felt very, very stuck. So they were doing this course to try and improve and try and move on to be that kind of CIO. But a lot of them kind of wished that they could move back. They missed the kind of problem solving of writing code, and they missed the fun of being part of a team, delivering something, and that kind of achievement. But most of them didn't know where to start, or they felt that there was just no way back for them. So this kind of taught me that for most people, leadership actually means leaving the technical behind. It means you have to stop writing code or building systems. And it really kind of means that leadership, in this sense, moving into management like that, is actually a career change. It's not really a promotion. You're switching to something else, into a different kind of skill set. Now, as luck would have it, just as I finished my master's, my immediate manager left and moved to the US. And I got pushed into his role. So I was now the engineering manager for multiple teams. And I was doing more kind of resource management and customer management. I was still trying to stay technical. I took the role going, I know it's probably going to mean that I'm going to have to leave some of the technical behind, but I was very, very resolved to stay technical. You can probably tell where this story is going to go. So I just kind of went along with that promotion because it was a promotion. It was more money and it was good. And I kind of just assumed that I wanted to climb that ladder because that was really the only way I could go from what I saw. So after about 2 years in the role, I'd gotten good as a leader. I was a far better leader than I was when I started. But I did realize that I was missing a lot in technology. I'd fallen very, very far behind. I hadn't written code for about a year at that time. But I still thought I was a great developer. So I still thought I was one of the best developers on the team because I was the engineering manager. And in my hubris, I applied for a job at Microsoft, and I was firmly rejected, given some very, very good feedback from Microsoft, but a solid no from them. And that was a huge hit to my ego at the time, as I'm sure you can imagine. I kind of thought I was much better than I really was. But I kind of took that feedback on board, and I did what any developer who's been told they're not good enough does, and I became an architect. And that's a joke. Sorry if there's any architects out there. I took a different role. It was an architect title, but it was very much writing code. So I was back on the tools, I was back writing code, and back kind of happy where I was. So, I guess just to recap, what I learned from that experience was that technical ability does not entitle you to leadership, and you shouldn't feel like it should. For me, I was the best developer. I should be the tech lead. I should be the engineering manager. And to be honest, it may not be what you want. Like, leadership may not be your thing. It may not be something that you want to do. Tips for you. Own your own career development. Like I said, companies suck at giving leadership training. So you don't have to go do a master's like I did or do a degree in it, but there's certainly a lot of resources out there, and we'll give you some at the end of this presentation. And plan where you want to go. Plan what your kind of next 5 years look like. I know you've probably heard this advice before, but you do need to realize what it is that you want to achieve and really figure that out. And talking to people, as Donna said, really, really helps. And the second is take your time in roles. I went from senior developer to technical lead to engineering manager in 5 years, and I wasn't particularly good at any of them, which I found out with great shock. If I'd spent more time in those roles and really learned the craft of software engineering, I would have been much better off.
So after I'd sold the retail computer business, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to work in retail anymore. If anyone's worked in retail, you'll understand why. So I basically needed to start from scratch and get a foot in the door in the corporate world. So I did that via agency recruitment, which still gives me a little bit of a shiver down the back of my spine, but you do what you got to do. And what I really loved about IT recruitment was that I got to meet so many amazing, smart, interesting people that were looking for their next career opportunity. And I got to listen and learn from them firsthand about what they were looking for, why they were looking to leave, what made a great place to work or what made a bad place to work. And I don't think I really realized at the time, but it's really helped me in my leadership journey because it's given me so much empathy and understanding about actually what people care about and what they want. And the big thing that jumped out at me is that most people weren't leaving a company. They were leaving a manager or a leader or a lack of leadership. So that was a huge learning experience. I escaped the agency world by the skin of my teeth after a couple of years, and I moved sideways into an internal IT recruitment role for a very large managed services organisation. And that was my first experience with a big company. So, getting to learn about political landscapes and how to navigate them and large executive teams was eye-opening. It's a whole nother world. And after 12 months with this company, I was organically promoted into a team lead role of 4. And I say organically, but my colleague at the time, Daryl, who he doesn't mind me talking about him, would disagree because he'd been there for longer than me and he had the same amount of experience. And the company didn't view him as a leader because of his behaviours versus my behaviours. And I've always fundamentally believed that if you behave like a leader, you will eventually get given the title and given the promotion to match. And it has been my personal experience. But what that means, I've realised, is that sometimes it means the more introverted people or people that come from a hierarchical cultural background, like Daryl did, are at a massive disadvantage when it comes to promotions and comes to who's considered a leader in the organisation. Daryl used to say to me, "Why do you like getting in trouble all the time, Donna? I don't understand why you like getting in trouble." And I didn't see it as getting in trouble. My natural style was, if I see something wrong, I would just go and fix it. I'm not going to ask permission, I'm just going to go and fix it. And if I see something wrong and it's not in my realm of control, I'm going to escalate it, and then I'm going to push, and annoy the hell out of people until they fix it. And that's my natural style. So, one of the big learnings that came out of that is that we need to look at the organisations that we work for and make sure that it is conducive to our leadership journey, because sometimes it might not be. And we're going to talk a bit more about that down the track. The other big thing that I observed in this company was similar to what Ian talked about, technical people that are the best technical person or the subject matter expert getting pushed or promoted because they're the best technical person. And sometimes they didn't really want to, but it was the only opportunity for a pay rise or for a promotion. And what this meant was, leadership training, we did have an amazing 5-day course. So, we were great. We would put people on this 5-day course and then, yep, you're good to go, you're a leader now. So, that was, 5 days. Much better than what some companies do. So what it meant was that we had a lot of inexperienced leaders, some of who didn't really know how to be a leader or some who didn't really want to be a leader. And needless to say, employee attrition started to get worse as well. But the worst thing was that these leaders would come and talk to me in my role, and they would talk to me about how unhappy they were, but they felt stuck. They felt like if they went back to a technical role, they had the appearance of taking a demotion, which nobody likes, or if they went back to a technical role, they had to take a pay cut, which nobody likes. Or the worst one was that they felt like they'd already been off the tools for too long and then they were stuck. They actually couldn't go back to a technical role. And that was quite heartbreaking to watch people in that position. Not good. So the big learnings for me throughout that experience was that I shouldn't be afraid of moving backwards or sideways. It's way more important that you love what you do and that you're getting fulfilled from your day-to-day job than the appearance, of promotions or demotions or whatever. And to try and create safe ways to move sideways or backwards when you're taking your next step. That people rarely leave companies, they do leave managers. So it's a really big responsibility for us. If I choose to be a leader, I need to also accept that responsibility that, I'm looking after my teams and it's my job to make sure that they're happy and that they're fulfilled and that they're empowered, because if they leave, it's going to be partly to do with me. So accepting that responsibility, I think, was a really big learning for me. And reflecting on the culture of the organisation that I work for and making sure that it is conducive to my personal career development. So some tips for you, we've covered a little bit of this, but try and get some exposure to a leadership role or a management role before you move into it. So think about, is there a secondment that you can take so that you can try it out? Is there a project or something that you can take on the side of your role where you're leading or managing a team so that once again you can try it out? Can you work with a mentor who's already in a management role or a leadership role and understand from them what their day-to-day job looks like and whether you think that's something that you actually want? And do some career planning. So, similarly to what Ian was saying, plan out where you think you want to go, but think about and reflect on where your day-to-day joy comes from. Where does your fulfillment and where does your buzz and your kick every day going to work, where does that come from? Because you want to make sure that you still get that if you move into a leadership role or a management role.
On that secondment thing, I've talked to a lot of people when we were kind of prepping for this talk, and in general, most people agree that if you are going to do that, like move to a leadership role, give yourself about a year to 2 years to actually kind of get good at it. It's not a kind of a 3-month kind of thing. I'm going to try out being a manager or being a leader. You need a bit of time just to get used to it and kind of rewire your brain. And as well on that, like, in terms of losing your development skills, which I talked about before, it kind of takes about 3 or 4 years from my experience for people to really kind of lose it and get kind of too far away. I don't know if that applies if you do JavaScript, because that's a bit quicker, but it still isn't working.
I'm going to tell Jennifer about that.
Hey? Oh, don't, God. So change, I'd made a change. I'd gotten out of my role. I'd been there for 5 years in total. Gotten very, very kind of comfortable there, even with the progression that I'd had. So it was a kind of a sideways move. I didn't take a massive pay cut because it was an architect title. Ka-ching. But I was writing code again, and I was leading teams. So I was back doing what I kind of loved. But it was a very narrow tech focus. I was working in kind of content management systems, which suck. And I'd gotten really, really kind of comfortable again. I'd gotten really used to what the job was. So I decided that I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone. And a contract role came up with Microsoft, my old friends. And I got it. I took it. And I worked with them for about 6 months, leaving that role. And I was back as a senior developer, so I was just writing code. I wasn't responsible for leading a team anymore. I was just purely writing code with an awesome, awesome team in Microsoft. And they did offer me a full-time role, which I turned down in revenge. I'm just joking. I actually made a pretty big decision that I pushed myself even further out of my comfort zone and moved to Australia. So while I was kind of getting ready to move, I attended a conference kind of like this, except it was on a bus driving around Ireland. It was called FunConf. You should look it up. It got a bit crazy after that. And I met some really, really awesome people. And I decided that I wanted to work with them. And in the kind of 8 months before I moved to Australia, and probably the year after, I worked with 2 of the best teams that I think I've ever worked with. And I learned more in the, I think, 12 months that I worked with them than I had in the previous kind of 7 years of my career. And when I think back about what those teams had in common, what made them great teams to work with, it was that they were very self-directed. They had managers. There was someone in each team with the official kind of manager or team lead title. But those people were very involved. They were writing code as well, day to day. And the teams were in charge of how they did work. They were in charge of what they delivered and how they delivered it. That manager wasn't able to kind of pull rank on any decisions that the teams made. So they were a function, or the management was a function of what they were doing with the team. Whoop. And that really kind of changed my thinking about what leadership is. Because as I started to look at this, at these teams who kind of work together, they were expected to demonstrate leadership in themselves. So every person on this team was expected to demonstrate that. They're expected to kind of contribute their knowledge and help the team decide what and how they should do things. And they were expected to take ownership of what they were delivering. They mentored each other. They gave feedback to each other regardless of title. It didn't matter if you were talking to the manager, to someone who'd been there 3 or 4 years longer than you. Everyone was very open. And it wasn't critical. No one was an asshole about the feedback they were giving. They all respected each other very much. But they were very, very open about what each other could do to improve. And that's a very different kind of environment to kind of be in and work in. So if you work in a kind of a more formal hierarchy, after I moved on from there, I worked in another few places, particularly in government, where there is that kind of hierarchy. You kind of have to ask to be given some of that responsibility to take that leadership. But I've never met a manager who said no to that, to be honest with you. If you ask them for more responsibility and ask them, how can I help you to kind of do your job? They'll give it to you. They'll let you kind of take that on. So leadership is something that you can do within a team without being anointed as a leader or as a manager with a title. So my learning from this, it's okay to take a step backwards. I took a contract role, so the money wasn't a massive hit, but it was still a cut. But it very much got me back doing what I wanted to do and got my technical skills back up to where I wanted them to be. It's good to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You don't have to move to Australia to do that, but it's good to kind of get out and get into a different environment or a different area. And the last one there is that management is a function, but leadership is a quality. And it's a quality that you can build within a team. Tips for you. Find awesome people. You have the perfect opportunity at this conference to talk to people who work in different companies from you. Ask them what they do. Ask them what their company is doing. Go and talk to the sponsors. See what they're doing. Find those awesome people that you want to work with, and then go and work with them. And you can be a leader without a title. You don't have to wait until you've gotten that title or you've been appointed to the position before you can start building that. We'll go into a bit more detail on that in the next one.
So I'd been at the managed services company for a couple of years, and I'd signed up to their formal mentoring program, which I always recommend that you do if your company has one. And that had helped me understand what I didn't want to do, which was to be a project manager. No offense, any project managers. And I knew that I wanted to have more of an effect on the employee culture and the employee journey once we'd hired them. But because it was a big company, it was very siloed. So when I looked at the different opportunities, I just didn't feel that there was anything that was the direction I wanted to go in. So I looked elsewhere, and an opportunity came up in a very small software development consultancy that had about 20 people at the time. And they had really big growth plans. They wanted to double in size in 12 months, and they wanted to become a best place to work and win a big Australian award. Now, and the role was a HR manager role. So the role would have full empowerment over the entire, culture, growth, employee life cycle, which was pretty exciting. But it was pretty risky as well. This company had a reputation for creating new roles and then getting rid of them if they decided they didn't work out very quickly. And the company also had a really high employee turnover, and there was some cultural challenges that people in the market knew. And obviously, coming from recruitment, I'd heard a lot of these stories firsthand. So I spoke to one of my mentors, one of my informal mentors, and had a conversation about it. And they helped me to understand that if it was going to be a learning and a growth opportunity, even if it did last for a year, what's the downside? Am I going to learn and grow and develop? And is it going to help my career progression because of that? Yeah. So I said yes. And I took the HR manager role, and from, I guess, over about a 4-year period, we grew from 20 to 120. We hit all of our growth and revenue milestones, and smashed all of the things we wanted to achieve, and we won a number 6 Best Place to Work in Australia award after 3 years. So it was an amazing learning experience for me, and it was where I got to really develop a lot of my leadership skills. The first thing I got to develop and learn was upwards managing. And I don't know if everybody knows what that means, but it basically just means that you're needing to manage your direct manager or potentially your executive team. And that was a big learning experience for me. So I had quite a challenging manager, and multiple people had left the business because they couldn't work with this person, including executive level people. And I guess the biggest learnings that I took from that whole experience was building trust. Everything comes down to building trust with a manager like that, making them feel like you understand what they're trying to achieve, and genuinely trying to understand, what equals success for them, what's going to make their life easier, and how can I help them with that. And the more that I, did my job, helped them, the more they would let go, and the more that they would empower me, which made me very happy. The other thing is focusing on what they're good at. Everybody is good at something, even the most annoying people in the world. Everyone is good at something. So if you focus on, for me, I had to focus on, okay, what can I learn from this manager? Where's that thing that they're exceptional at? And focusing on that, helped my perception of them, and it just made the whole experience a lot easier. So I think it's a really important skill to develop as a leader, because it's our job to protect our teams, sometimes from managers that are quite challenging or potentially toxic. And by the end of the 5 years working with this manager, I had a lot of respect for them, and I was a trusted confidant for them. So it went pretty well. Similarly to in the managed services organisation, this company absolutely had a culture that favoured the extroverted and a certain consulting personality type. You shouldn't have to ask for promotions, but in my experience in lots of different roles and talking to lots of different people, you often still do have to go and ask. The same applies for salaries, right? It's not ideal and it shouldn't be that way, but it often is. So I'd been at this company for about 3 years, and I approached them and told them that I wanted a general manager title to reflect the actual role that I was doing on a day-to-day basis. It's a bit of a hairy conversation. It's never nice having them. But I did it because I knew that that was the job I was actually doing. And I knew that they never would have come to me and approached me with that offer. So they thought about it for a couple of days. They came back and said, yep, absolutely, done. The company was acquired 6 months down the track. And if I hadn't gone and had that conversation and got the title to reflect my actual job, I would have been in a much worse negotiating position with the new company that acquired us. So I guess I want to make the point that even if we don't care about titles, it is important that it reflects what we actually do, because that will have an impact on your career opportunity in your next company, and you never know what's going to happen in your current company, especially in IT, right? We're getting acquired all the time. The other thing that I experienced in this organisation was, from a leadership perspective, people really respect and follow leaders who are authentic, who lead by example, and who do what they say they'll do. I've since moved on from that company, and I've had quite a few people follow me to my new company because they know that I'll be transparent with them. They know that I'll do what I say that I'll do. So that's a really important quality to develop and practice as a leader. The other thing was, as a leader, I learned that it was my responsibility to look at the culture of the company and to create shared values. It's really important that those shared values are aligned and collaboratively developed with your teams, because at the end of the day, it's actually the behaviours that create the culture of the company. So you've got to have some shared values to be recognising and rewarding behaviours and working towards. So that was something I got to develop and experience in that organisation. So the key learnings and takeaways for me was learning how to uppers manage was really important, and learning how to make sure that my team were protected. If you don't ask, you don't get. It still is the case with promotions, titles, and salaries. And creating those shared values, making sure that we take responsibility as a leader for our team's values and culture. Some tips for you. There's an amazing book which, oh my goodness, I wish I had 7 years ago when I worked at this company and learned how to uppers manage, called Multipliers. It's incredible. It gives you really practical tools and tips and advice for how to deal with challenging managers. And it also gives you some insights to make sure that you're not one of those managers. It probably would have been good to read 15 years ago, actually. So I definitely recommend reading that, and it also gives you some good tips around how you can be an exceptional leader as well and have that multiplier effect on your teams because you're a great leader. Know your worth. Make sure that you keep up to date with salary surveys. There's some resources at the end of things that you can go and have a look at. But make sure that you know where you should be sitting from a role title and from a salary perspective, so that when you need to have that conversation with your manager, which you will need to do one day, or sometimes every year, make sure that you can talk about it objectively. It's not a personal thing, it's objective. This is what the market is, this is where I sit due to my experience. And practice those conversations. Practice them with a friend or with a mentor, because they can get a little bit nervy. And we've already talked about the shared values. So once again, just making sure that you're thinking about that as a leader and that you're working with your teams proactively to define what those values are. Sorry.
No. Surprise. So I wasn't in Kansas anymore. I was in Australia. And I'd actually kind of, I'd started to miss the community of kind of full-time work. So I'd still been contracting and kind of moving around quite a bit. And you miss the, knowing people for more than kind of 6 months. So, and I also kind of like the variety of consulting. So I had a look around. There were a few consultancy companies hiring. And one in particular was a little bit risky. They didn't have the best reputation in the market. They had a very high turnover from what I heard. But I met the new HR manager, and she convinced me that they were actually building something really, really cool. So I joined there in a kind of a technical lead role, so I was writing code still, but leading teams. And after a couple of years of developing day to day, I decided that I wanted to kind of progress. I wanted to be able to affect the company and try and help improve things. And to do that, I kind of had to take a step back and look at the kind of leader that I wanted to be. And for me, there's kind of, the way I categorize it is that there's 3 different kinds of leadership that I think of. The first is that functional leadership, which is for us technical leadership, where you're still writing code, but you're doing kind of managery things. Might be for the team, might be for the project. Then there's kind of people leadership, which is where you stepped away, you are directly managing people or leading people. You're looking after them day to day. You have no technical involvement. And the third is kind of strategic leadership. That's where you are helping your company or helping your organization to figure out where they should go or what they should do. And those roles can be quite different. In some companies, that strategic leadership doesn't happen until a kind of a director level or a CTO level. And in most companies that I've seen and worked in, that functional leadership or that functional involvement stops at some level as you move up that ladder. So you are expected to stop developing. And typically developers aren't involved in deciding what the strategy of the company is. So for me, I kind of wanted a combination of all 3. I still wanted to stay writing code. I didn't want to go away from that. But I did want to be able to be involved in kind of managing people because I like doing that. And in deciding that strategy because I wanted to kind of improve. I wanted to get more involved in what we were doing. So I worked through this with Donna, and she taught me absolutely heaps about the organization. She was my mentor for how this business worked and how business works. We did a bit of a gap analysis about kind of where I was and where I wanted to go to. As Donna said, this company had a very kind of sales lean in their leadership, so you kind of had to do sales as that. Now I know I'm standing up on stage presenting at the moment, but I'm a very naturally introverted person. If I didn't have this microphone on, you couldn't hear me in the front row there. So I didn't really kind of fit that mold of that kind of salesy person who could, go out and kind of sell things for it. So it would have been a difficult kind of move for me to make. And to give you like an idea of how little technical there was, my immediate manager was told that he couldn't have his IDE on his laptop. He had to uninstall Visual Studio. And I thought at the time it was a joke, but I don't think it really was it? That was the kind of thing that happened when you moved into leadership in this company. Now, I'm not trying to bag out the company. They were a great company to work for. They genuinely deserved their Best Place to Work award. But they had a very clear vision about what leadership was for them. And that company didn't exist to suit me. We did try and kind of work on how they saw kind of technical leadership and tried to change that. But ultimately, it wasn't something that we could do. It was just too far removed from what they saw as leadership. And I owed it to myself to kind of figure out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to be. I had a pretty clear idea that I wanted to be able to do those 3 things, the functional, the people, and the strategy. But I realized that I'd have to look to a different company. So I got back in touch with one of my friends from the first company I worked with in Australia, that awesome team, and he'd moved to Redify, which is the company I currently work for. And I moved there and took up a leadership position where I could still code and do that other stuff too. So, what I learned, the one big thing, there are always other companies. I was a typically a long-termer. I did 2 years at companies. It's very easy to get comfortable there and to kind of stick with it and kind of stick the company out, hoping that it will kind of improve. But there's always other companies that you can go to. So if it's not meeting what you kind of want it to meet, don't sacrifice yourself on the altar for that company, because the company won't do it for you, and they don't have to. Tips for you: understand the kind of leader that you want to be. Talk to leaders in your organization and see if that matches up. Talk to them about what their day-to-day job is and what it will potentially mean. I talk to a lot of the people on my teams about what it means to be a principal consultant at Redify, and some of them go, "That's not my bag. I don't want to do that." And they don't want to go for that role, and that's totally cool. And lastly, kind of find the place that you can do it. We've said this a few times. You need to find the kind of company that lets you be the kind of leader that you want to be.
So I'd been at that organisation for about 5.5 years, and I was starting, to get itchy feet. We'd had an acquisition, and that had gone well, but now we were another 12 months past that, and I couldn't see a progression opportunity for me. Ian had been at Redify for about 12 months at this point, and he approached me about a job opportunity. And it was a sideways step out of HR, which ended up being the best thing ever, and into a more general kind of state management or a state leadership role. So, I wasn't sure at the time whether that was the right move. I had a chat with my mentor again, and same conversation. Is it going to be a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity? If it doesn't work out after 12 months, is it still going to be a beneficial experience? And can I go back to HR if I really want to? Yeah. So I took the role, and that was 18 months ago now. And it's really been an incredible opportunity for me to put into practice everything that I've learned really over the last 20 years from a leadership perspective. In my previous roles, I had a lot to do with building a great culture, but what I've really realised and learned is that it's the management behaviour that sets the culture, from the top. So at Redify, I'm lucky enough to work with an executive team and a leadership team who, are everything I could dream of in terms of lead by example, do what they say, empower people, and what I've been able to be part of is taking empowerment to the next level. So not only empowering people in their day-to-day job role, which I think a lot of us are doing fairly well nowadays in companies, but actually empowering people to help the organisation develop and grow and succeed. So getting people involved in state initiatives or improvement initiatives, getting them involved in strategy planning. That next level of empowerment, of letting people have some control over the way that the company is actually going and what direction it's going in, and having some impact on it succeeding. And that's just been, it's been incredible to watch. The employee engagement has skyrocketed. People give more, they perform better, and they're just way more passionate when they're actually helping the organisation succeed and grow. So it's been a huge learning opportunity for me to see it in practice. And from an ex-micromanager, basically it's a parallel universe. It's bizarre, but it's so much better, and it actually makes my life a lot easier as well doing it this way. So it's a win-win. The other thing that I've seen in this organisation and been part of is that good companies and good leaders invest in their people's professional development and personal development. If people are learning and developing, once again, they're a lot happier and they're a lot more engaged. So at Redify, we invest time, we invest money so that people can do whatever it is that they're passionate about doing. And it works really well. A lot of companies that I've worked with get afraid. What if they outgrow us? What if we put all this time and money into them and they leave? I think it's Richard Branson, what if we invest in them and they don't leave? So I would say that, I've learnt that you don't need to be afraid of that. It's a good thing. Building great talent attracts more great talent because good people want to work with good people, right? So they'll join your company if they know you've got good people. And sometimes people will outgrow your company and they'll move on. So support them and help them to move on once again, it's a win-win. It will create advocates for your company out there in the market because they've had a good experience and you've helped them develop and you've helped them to move on. And leave the door open because often people come back.
Redify revolving.
We have a name for it, as we call it the Redify revolving door, because we have so many people that leave and come back, and I think that's a great testament to a good company. So my key learnings, throughout this experience has been empower, 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 and keep empowering. It makes people, so much happier. They perform better, and it makes your life a lot easier as well. Strengths-based leadership. If you haven't read any of the books around strengths-based leadership, they're on the resources list at the end. But it's incredible. Focusing on what people's strengths are rather than what their gaps are is a win-win. It builds their confidence, which in turn will help them address any gaps that they've got, and it helps your perception as a leader of them, because instead of focusing on what they don't do, you're focusing on what they're great at, and you can build teams so that the teams all have different strengths that work together well. You don't have to be good at everything, and you can't be good at everything. And supporting employees' development and growth is another really key thing that I've learnt. I've got the resource there. It'll be on the end as well. But the Gallup strengths-based stuff is fantastic. There's heaps of books. There's surveys so you can figure out your own strengths as well. There's an awesome book called Drive by Dan Pink, and it talks all about mastery, autonomy, and purpose, and it's really all around why empowerment works. Fantastic book. And one of my favourites that really helped me on my leadership journey was The Extraordinary Leader. It's a fantastic book as well. And these will be on the last slide.
Cool. So I'd moved on to Redify. I thought I'd found the place where I wanted to be. I still think I found the place where I want to be for now, anyway.
I was like, am I missing something? Did something happen?
Could be bad. And I realize this is probably going to turn into a bit of a sales pitch from Redify. We're talking about how amazing everything is. It is a good company to work for. And if you do want to move to Australia, just saying, you come talk to us or Yasser. Yasser's speaking next in room 3 on web optimization. Come along. So I'm a principal consultant at Redify, as I said before, and that's kind of the equivalent of a principal engineer. It's not a people role, but I work with people. I help the other consultants to develop. I mentor them. It's not a director role, but I do contribute to the strategy. I work with Donna and with our sales team on how we're going to approach the market, what we're going to deliver into that market. And I actually do have like a billable component, so I work with our customers around their kind of architecture and act as a kind of a CTO for some of them. And within the teams I work with, I'm expected to have a broad architectural view of the organization to understand what their landscape looks like. And that's across kind of multiple projects. I'm also expected to kind of get in deep, so be able to dive in and actually write code and understand code. And I do contribute to some of the projects that I work on. But when I do that, I'm doing it kind of off the critical path. I don't want to be there kind of blocking how the team works. So I am a member of the team. And my job as a leader now, as I kind of see it, is to kind of cultivate the culture of the team. It's not to be the best in the team. It's not to be that best developer and take all the glory. And it's not to be making technical decisions and kind of handing them down to them. The team does all of that themselves. They're far able to do that. And they're empowered to do that. And my job is to kind of challenge them and guide them in terms of what they're doing. Is it meeting kind of what we'd expect of our culture? And generally, it's about kind of helping them to grow into great developers and leaders themselves. I'm trying to coach myself out of a job on most of the projects that I do. So in practice, what it looks like is I help the team get started on the project. I'm typically involved in that pre-sales that we do, but I help them get ramped up, get everything going, make sure they're happy with the customer and how things are running there. And then kind of, as I said before, coach myself out of it. And once they don't need me anymore, I kind of consider my job done. Now, I don't abandon them. It's not like, off you go and do it all yourself. I still stay in touch. But if they don't need me, they don't need me. I've done a good job. If they do run into any issues that they can't figure out or can't get themselves out of, I do help them to figure it out, but I'm helping them to figure out how they're going to solve it. I'm not kind of wading in and solving it for them. And that's quite a different thing to get used to in a culture like this. It's hard to resist kind of jumping back in and kind of taking over and driving again, or facilitating, or managing the team, really. If I did that, though, the teams would start relying on me, and I'd have to stay much more involved in that. And that's the exact opposite of what I want to do. I want them to take over that leadership themselves. And I've had to learn how to define my success in that on the success of the team. Because I'm not 100% involved, when they smash it and do an amazing project, I can't really take credit for that. I didn't really do that much in it. I might have written a bit of code around the sides, but it wasn't me. So I have to take my successes from the team success. I'm not the one who gets kind of, the post on Yammer or on whatever communication tool you use, not directly mentioned in it, and that's okay, because for me it's about their success. But it took a while to learn that it's a very different kind of thing. And I have to focus on different signals because of that. So I'm not looking at things like project health. I'm not looking at timelines or delivery dates. I'm looking at how happy the people are. Are the team happy? Are they happy in what they're doing? Is the customer happy? Because that's a far better signal for what I'm trying to achieve and what my job actually is. And honestly, I don't think of myself as a manager at all. I'm not. I'm a kind of an engineering leader, maybe, if you like using that word, who does some kind of managery things. But a lot of the kind of credibility and the effectiveness in my role is in that expertise in tech. I have to be able to stay up to date with the technology that the teams are using day to day. If I can't help them and dive in, they're not really going to respect me as that kind of technical leader that I'm expected to be. So I have to stay up to date with skills and technology very, very regularly, like all of you do too as well. Whenever a new framework comes out, I have to get time to do that. Now, I'm lucky enough that I work for a company where we genuinely have that kind of training capacity, and it's something we can do. I'm actually on professional development now here at this conference, and I've had the whole week off, and I'll be able to do more training later on. So finding a company that lets you do that is super, super important, especially if you want to stay technical in that leadership pathway. And for me, kind of as a leader overall, I guess my kind of goal is to pursue a long-term kind of strategy for staying very technical. I don't want to stop writing code. I do still want to progress. I want to be able to affect kind of more change in the organizations that I work in. But I want to stay technical, and I want to find ways to do that. And there are a lot of companies that are doing this now, where we're starting to see kind of principal engineer roles at that almost kind of director level. As companies become more technical, as software eats the world, as we've started to say, being technical has become a lot more important, and it's become a lot more important for leadership. So I'm hoping that will allow me to progress, but still stay technical within there. And I want to be someone who writes good code. I don't claim to be the best developer in the world. I think I'm okay, but I do think I write good code. And that for me is something that's super important, because when I do contribute to those teams, if they check my PR and are like, that shit, that would be so embarrassing. And I want to be able to give kind of informed technical guidance. So I need to be able to cover everything from developers right the way through to kind of CEOs, and be able to kind of communicate to them what technical things mean. And lastly, like I said before, it really is about kind of improving the organization and making an impact. Like most of you, I think, I want my job to do something special. I want it to be making people's lives better. I like to work on things that have a real meaning and real kind of improvement. So, I guess what I've learned from my time at Redify is changing that focus, focusing on the different signals from a team as opposed to a project, it's quite a new learning experience for you. Figuring out what makes a better signal for whether things are going well or not. And like I said, for me, I think the most important one is just the happiness of people. You can tell if they're smiling when they're doing a retrospective, things are probably good. The second is that patience is a virtue. As in any sort of leadership role where you're not kind of directly involved in things day to day, you've lost that ability to affect change with your authority. So I can't go in and tell a team, don't do this architecture. I can go in and say, I don't think this architecture will work very well with what you want to do, but it's very much up to them whether or not they change it. So I have to be very patient in any sort of change that I want to make, and I have to let the teams kind of come to their own conclusion about some things, even if I know that it's probably going to be a mistake for them. Cool. And tips for you. So as you move into leadership, some of you probably are, your job now is about kind of growing your team into great developers and great leaders themselves. And that's something you can start doing now. It's something you can change your mindset a little bit around the team that you're currently in. If you can think about how can we make things better, how can I help my teammates, that's the kind of mindset shift that you need to get into in terms of moving into a leadership role. And if you are in a leadership role, do find the time to code. Do keep up to date. Do keep your tech skills there. Block that time out. Turn your phone off. Mute all your laptop notifications and just spend that time coding, and do stay up to date. Cool.
So I guess when we talked about all of our experience and all of the different things that we've learned, we've come up with these 4 things that we think are probably the most important for anyone looking at moving into a leadership role. And I want to preface this a little bit with, we're not saying that leadership is bad at all, so we don't want to put anyone off moving into a leadership role. Being a leader is amazing. You know, you get to help so many people grow and develop. It's just important to know what you're in for and make sure that that's suitable for you. So the first one is, don't rush. Don't rush into it. Don't get pushed into it. Take the time to, try it out, do some mentoring, understand it before you just jump on in because, the promotion's there, your manager's left, and you just get pushed into it.
Yeah, and the second is find that fit. So find that company that will let you be the kind of leader that you want to be.
And all of us can learn to be great leaders. I think there's this perception that you do a 5-day course or you do a 2-week course or maybe even an MBA and you know how to be a good leader. But it's no different to being a developer. How many years did it take you to be a great developer? It's a skill, it's an art. You need to learn it, and it takes a long, long time to learn and practice it. But you can, and all of us can.
Yep. And learning to define your success, like I just said before, it's now about your team's success. It's not about yours anymore. And that's a very, very, very big change for people to be able to make that kind of mental shift. Cool.
So, ultimate resource list here, if anybody wants to take a picture of some of the things that we've put over the other slides. Big thank you for getting up so early. We'd love any feedback. If anybody wants to come and have a chat and has questions, we'd love to hang around and have a chat. And if you do have feedback of things that you've liked about this talk or you think we could improve, we'd love that as well. So, yeah, huge thank you.
Good.